Hey, welcome. So, today we're going to dive into a really unique way of looking at the world around us. This all comes from a 1982 sermon by Reverend Sun Myung Moon called The Day of All Things. And it offers this really powerful way to think about our relationship with nature, with each other, and really the whole purpose of why we're here. So, let's kick things off with the biggest question of all. So, the sermon kicks off with a question that's, at the heart of so many belief systems. Why is there anything at all? Why was this whole world, with all its creatures and its incredible complexity, ever even created? I mean, it's a massive question, right? But the text gives a surprisingly simple answer. That's it. One word: joy. But, and this is the key part, according to the sermon, we're not just talking about a feeling, like simple happiness. It's something way more dynamic, more interactive. So, what do they mean by joy? All right, so what is this joy we're talking about? Well, it's not some feeling you have all by yourself. It's described as this active experience that happens between a subject, that could be God or you or me, and an object, like, well, the entire natural world. It's this constant give and take, this exchange of energy and love, that's supposed to create real harmony and connection. Okay, so if joy is all about interaction, how are we supposed to learn how to do it? Well, according to the sermon, the lesson plan was right there from the start. It was all around us. Our very first textbook, it was nature itself. So to make this point, the text paints this really vivid picture using Adam and Eve. You've got Adam, right? He represents the masculine, and he's totally captivated by the big, powerful stuff, the mighty eagle, those huge, strong trees. And then there's Eve, representing the feminine. She's drawn to the more delicate, intricate things, a beautiful little swallow, tiny flowers. And look, the point here isn't that one's better than the other. No way. It's that they're complementary. They're actually learning about each other and the world by seeing creation from these two totally different but equally important points of view. And it wasn't just some vague feeling they were supposed to get. The lessons from nature's classroom were super specific and really deep. Just by watching the world around them, they'd see cooperation. Think about ants all working together. They'd see family and love in the way rabbits and birds raise their young. They'd hear communication and harmony in birdsong. The whole world becomes this living, breathing classroom for how relationships work. And this quote, it just nails it. This way of thinking says that creation wasn't just, pretty scenery for the main event. No, it was an active, intentional textbook designed to teach humanity the absolute fundamentals of life and love before they even got into the messy business of dealing with each other. Okay, so let's follow this idea. If nature is a textbook, then what does that make the world we're living in right now? And that question leads us to the sermon's central metaphor, and it's a really powerful shift in how you see everything. Instead of seeing the world as just a bunch of resources for us to use, this perspective reframes the entire planet as a divine museum, and not some stuffy building with old relics, but a living, breathing gallery of masterpieces. Honestly, this one idea completely flips the script on how we value the things around us. So let's break this down, because the distinction is really important. Think about a normal man-made museum. It's full of stuff that's valuable because of its human story, right? A president's pen, an old pot. They're basically historical artifacts. They're dead. But in this divine living museum, a single blade of grass is presented as something way more complex and valuable. Why? Because its value is intrinsic. It's a living masterpiece from the creator. I mean, that's a huge contrast to our modern mindset, which often values some new gadget way more than the natural world that actually keeps us alive. So you might be thinking, what about the not-so-nice parts of nature? Well, this worldview has an answer for that too. The text actually suggests that things like poisonous snakes or thorns on a rose aren't just bad. They're like security devices. They're there to make us slow down, be more careful, more appreciative, to protect the most precious spots in nature from just being trampled or taken for granted. So in this view, literally everything has a purpose. And all of this, seeing the world as this divine museum, is supposed to be the foundation for a totally different and much deeper understanding of human love. So the sermon lays out a pretty clear path, almost like a curriculum. Step 1, you have to learn to truly love and appreciate nature. That's your basic training. Once you've got that down, you can move on to the next level, loving other people, humanity as a whole. And then finally, you can graduate, so to speak, and fulfill that entire education in the most intimate relationship of all, with a spouse. And within this framework, the sermon makes this really interesting distinction between two kinds of love. First, there's flat or shallow love.
This is the kind of love that's tied to superficial things, like a pretty face. The sermon says it's easy to stand on, but there's not much to it. But then there's spherical love. This love has depth, it has nobility, and it's all about a person's inner character. It might be harder to find your balance with, but it's way, way more profound.
Now, this next quote from the text is definitely provocative, but it really makes that abstract idea of spherical love feel concrete. The point it's trying to make is that real, deep, spherical love often shows up where we least expect it, and it has absolutely nothing to do with conventional ideas of beauty. And that brings us to our final question. At the end of the day, the core message here is a pretty radical reframing of value. It's a challenge to stop seeing the world as just a pile of resources for us to use up and start seeing it as a living museum, just filled with priceless gifts. And whether you agree with the theology behind it or not, it's a powerful thought experiment. Just think about it. If every single thing, from a blade of grass to the person sitting next to you, is a priceless masterpiece, how does that change the way you live your life?